Hi, everyone. Welcome to Your Money Map, sponsored by the Alliance for Lifetime Income. I'm Jean Chatzky. Very happy to be with all of you on this last day of June. I am excited to tell you all about our guest, but I also want to welcome you into this conversation as always. When you join us in the comments, if you have questions, if you have actual comments, tell us who you are. Tell us where you are. Tell us what temperature it is where you are. I don't think it's quite hit 100 where I am in New York City today, but it certainly feels like it. So I hope wherever you happen to be that you are inside, that you are staying cool, and that you're just taking a little bit of a breather as we share some important and very interesting information. My guest today is Steve Vernon. Steve has been with us on this show before. We have been wanting to have him back for quite some time. He's a consulting research scholar with the Stanford Center on Longevity in the Financial Security Division. He writes, he speaks, he researches, and he digs into the most challenging issues facing retirees today, including those regarding finance, lifestyle, health, choice of where to live. He's been a columnist for Forbes, and his latest book is Don't Go Broke in Retirement, a simple plan to build lifetime retirement income. Steve, welcome. It's so nice to have you here.
Oh, Jean, thanks for having me back. I really enjoy talking with you.
Thank you. Me as well. We are seeing a lot of people joining us. They're all over the place, all over the world actually, where it seems to be just as hot as it is here. So thank you for being with us, everybody. I hope that you are staying cool. Steve, as we launch into this discussion, the Alliance recently completed a big study called the Protected Retirement Income and Planning Study. I know that you have had a chance to dig into this research. What have you learned?
Well, when I read the survey, it just impressed me that protected income is becoming more and more important with people in their thoughts. And this is natural because as the baby boom generation enters into retirement, they start focusing in on, do they have income that will last the rest of their life and won't go down if the stock market crashes. So it's just natural that people start focusing in on that. And you couple that with the decline of traditional pensions. So I think it's a natural phenomenon that people would be more interested in having some sort of protected income. And that was really the biggest takeaway, was the increased interest that people have in protected income.
There's a lot of confusion, I think, around the concept of protected income. Can we talk about what qualifies and what really doesn't?
Okay, so protected income is what I just said. It lasts the rest of your life, no matter how long you live. So you don't need to worry about living a long time. And if the stock market crashes, it doesn't go down. I think for most people, the largest source of protected income is Social Security, because when you think about it, it meets those criteria that I just said. And our research shows that for most people, Social Security is going to be anywhere from 3/4 to 90 or even all of their total retirement income. So it's a very important source. And I always encourage people, take steps to get the most out of Social Security. Then, once you've maximized your Social Security, if you still want more protected income, typical sources are those traditional pensions, if you still participate in one. And they're actually common with government employers, and many unions have pensions. So that's another possible source. But if you don't have a pension from your employer, then buying an annuity from an insurance company is the other source. And to me, those are the Social Security, pensions, and annuities. Those are the three most common sources of protected income.
We're dealing with a number of factors at play here in the economy. There's an awful lot of talk of inflation, of keeping up with inflation, of whether inflation is transitory right now. if you are somebody in your 50s, maybe even your early 60s, and you're starting to look out at your retirement, how do you figure out how much of your monthly nut you should try to cover with protected income, and how much of your remaining assets you should be investing for growth to potentially keep up with inflation?
Well, that's an excellent question. And what I encourage people to do is spend the time, either themselves or hire an advisor to help them think that through. Because I think a lot of people will want a pretty significant portion of their income that covers their basic living expenses, utilities, food, roof over your head. You want to cover those with protected income sources, and also hope that they're protected against inflation. And let me drill down on that. Social Security is indexed for inflation. So that, again, is another good reason why you want to get the most out of Social Security. And you think about it, then if 3/4 of your total income comes from Social Security, then 3/4 is protected against inflation. So I'm going to sound like a broken record about Social Security. Most pensions are not increased for inflation, and I don't call that a criticism. It's just, that's the situation. And then with annuities, that's kind of interesting. You can buy an annuity that is increased for a certain percentage if you're worried about inflation. So I know I'm going on some details, but I just want to bring the point is that planning for inflation is part of your planning, and either figure out yourself how much you need to have covered and increased for inflation, or work with an advisor who can help you.
Another thing that the study really dug into a bit was the fact that we're in this environment where earning money on quote unquote safer investments, on fixed income investments, bonds, has become more and more challenging with interest rates at near historic lows. How do you suggest that people deal with that issue?
Well, and that's a serious issue, and it just reflects the times we're in. I like to think of we're all in the same time, and every time has its own unique hurdles, and low interest rates is one of them for current retirees. It gets back to, I'm going to sound like a broken record, in maximizing your Social Security. If one way to do that is if you retire before the optimal age to start Social Security, which a lot of people, that's age 70, and yet a lot of people retire before that age. If you use your savings to replace Social Security before you actually start that is, my analyses show, that is the best use of your savings. And even if those savings only earn 1%, in effect, you're earning like 8 or 9% by delaying Social Security. And so when I hear about low interest rates, the very first thing is take your savings and help you use them for a Social Security bridge strategy.
Let's dig into that a little bit more, because I do think, and if people have questions about this, we're seeing people who are here from South Jersey, just outside of Philly, from Long Island, where it is a hot day. Hi to Gerard. From Argentina, where it's cold outside. We wish we were you today. From Saudi Arabia. Wow. I think that no matter where people are, particularly in the United States, when to claim Social Security is very complicated. It varies based on your marital status. It varies based on your age discrepancy with your spouse, if one is a lot younger and one is a lot older. It varies if you're divorced or widowed. I was telling Steve just yesterday, and I'll recommend this to everybody, the New York Times actually published a piece on Monday, an in-depth Social Security claiming strategy article for women, and it was really well done. So if there are women who are watching, you can go ahead and take a look at that. But Steve, can you explain why it's so important to think about delaying Social Security, particularly in this environment?
Well, let me build on what I just said. Is that our analyses show that using your savings to help you enable delaying Social Security is a very smart strategy for most people. And so, and yet, how do you do that? Let me just tell you the basic way it might work is that suppose you retire at 65 and your monthly Social Security benefit would be at that time $2,000 a month. But then if you delayed it till age 70, it's going to be like $2,600 a month. And that's an extra $600 a month for the rest of your life. How do you delay till 70? Well, you could work just enough money to cover your Social Security benefit. And that's actually the best way, because I think there are other advantages to working part-time in your retirement. But if you don't want to work or can't work, then here's you set up this bridge and you say your monthly benefit would have been $2,000 a month at age 65. Well, that's 60 months. You're delaying until age 70. Well, 2,000 times 60 months, if I do my math right in my head, that's $120,000. Set that aside and you draw off that until you start Social Security at age 70. That's the basic idea. Now, maybe you don't have enough money to set aside 120,000. Even if you delay till 68, that's a good strategy. So I'm just giving you the basics of how that could work.
No, I think that's really helpful. And I think it's advice that we just can't repeat often enough, because we know that still the majority of people in this country tap their Social Security at age 62. And by doing so, they're leaving a significant and guaranteed return on the table. So if you can at all help it, it is something worth considering. Another thing that the survey revealed was that a number of people, many younger investors at this point, 71%, have some interest in purchasing annuities as part of their overall retirement income plan. That's definitely an increase from what we had seen in the past. Annuities can be complicated products because there are so many different types of them. So if you're interested in perhaps adding this to your portfolio, what's the best way to go about it, and how do you get the help that you need?
And that's a great question, Jean, and I get that question a lot too, is that you really want to consider when's the right age to buy an annuity. So if you're at your 30s, that's something to keep in mind, but for later. Whereas as you get closer to retirement in your 50s, maybe, that might be the time to start thinking about investigating an annuity. And keep in mind, let me go on a little tangent for a second. Annuities have gone kind of full circle. They used to be like a pension. You got a lifetime monthly income. That was decades ago. But lately they've been sold more as an investment and a tax deferral strategy, and they started losing sight of the protected retirement income. And now it's coming full circle back to protected retirement income. And so that says to me that the biggest audience for protected income is people in their 50s and older who are approaching their retirement years. And I think for most folks, it's well worth your time either learning about it on your own, or working with someone who you trust who can help you think through these issues. And I think it's real important to find a financial advisor who will advise you and serve as a fiduciary on your behalf and act in your best interest. And that's when you're looking for a financial advisor, ask, will you serve as a fiduciary for me? So, it basically indicates this is part of the homework, part of the time that you'll need to spend either learning on your own or shopping for an advisor who has your best interest at heart.
Because one of the things I think that people don't do is to get a sense of what their actual needs will be, right? When we look at the data on people running the numbers on their own retirement, figuring out what is it going to cost me to keep a roof over my head? What is it going to cost me to keep a car in my driveway? What is it going to cost me to pay for healthcare as I age? And those numbers get pretty complicated, and having somebody work it through with you, I think, is necessary in many cases if you don't feel like you have the capability to do it yourself.
I agree. And let me just add a story. I wrote a post recently at Forbes that said, "Are you up for this retirement job?" And what I did was I estimated what are you paying yourself per hour if you either do the homework yourself or hire an advisor and work with that advisor? And you are paying yourself hundreds of dollars per hour, even $1,000 per hour. That's the value you're creating for yourself. So I ask you, are you willing to work on a job that pays you $500 or $1,000 an hour? I hope the answer is yes. And so I'm just saying this to motivate people. It's well worth your time to either look into your options or work with a financial advisor.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. And let me just say, if people are looking for a financial advisor, a fiduciary, as Steve said, and you're struggling about where to look, at hermoney.com, which is my website, we have a locator service, a free locator service where you can fill out a questionnaire. We'll serve up a couple of recommendations. Nobody is going to call you, so you can decide whether you want to make contact with an advisor after that. But they're all fiduciaries, and again, that means that they have your they have a responsibility to put your interests before their own, and that is incredibly important. As we, Steve, look at this question of healthcare, which is one of the, I guess, unknowables as we go forward into retirement, how do you suggest that people think about the amount of money that they'll need to pay for that? And the question of whether or not they need a long-term care policy or can afford a long-term care policy to help pay for care down the road.
Okay, that's a great question. And there are a lot of components to your question. So first, let me distinguish between paying for healthcare and actually staying healthy. And I'll just put in a quick plug. One of the best protections against high bills for insurance is being serious about your exercise, your diet, and all that. So you probably heard this before, but I just had to say it once.
No, you're so right. A few years back, I wrote a book with a doctor, Michael Roizen from the Cleveland Clinic, and he made this point that stays in my mind, that 70 to 75% of chronic diseases and the bills that come with them could be avoided if we just exercise, eat right, avoid trans fats, stop smoking if you're smoking, and do what you can to bring down your stress levels. And it's an amazing amount of money.
It is. And let me add, when I see surveys of retirees and says, what's the number one factor of your happiness in retirement? Inevitably, it's good health is what retirees list as the factor that makes them happy in retirement. So I just wanted to add that, not only for the money, but for your happiness. Okay, so we've talked about staying healthy, but now let's get to paying for it.
Yeah, exactly.
You need to distinguish between medical care and long-term care. And let me make that distinction. Medical care is paying for a doctor, a nurse, a hospital, fixing you when you're sick or have an injury. And that actually, for retirees, is covered for most part if you participate in Medicare, which I strongly encourage you to do, and then buy some kind of a Medicare supplement, either a Medicare supplement plan or a Medicare Advantage plan. If you have that combination in place, then all you're paying for is your monthly premiums, and you might have some deductibles and co-payments, and they're much more budgetable. And so that's the way to cover your medical expenses. And you see these scary stories like, oh, a 65-year-old couple needs $500,000 to pay for medical. And I think that's getting people's attention, but you don't have to have that $500,000 in the bank when you retire. You know, all you have to do is pay your Medicare premium each month and pay your Medicare supplement or Medicare Advantage premium each month.
Right. I mean, I've done the math on those numbers, and I think it's actually closer to $300,000 a year, or $300,000 in total now for that 65-year-old couple. But when you do the math, when you divide it by the couple, divide it in two, and then divide it year by year, it's about $5,000 a year per person. So it's your Medicare premiums and all of the copays and prescription drugs that are not covered.
Yeah, and it's still substantial to plan for. It's just not this gigantic number. Now let's move on to long-term care, because that was part of your question. And long-term care is care when you get frail and you need help with, it's called activities of daily living, preparing your food, taking your medications, using the restroom, showering, all those. And some people reach a stage in their life they can't do that on their own. And for many of us listening to this, you might have seen this with your parents, and that was the teachable moment, the wake-up call. So that's a serious issue to plan for as well. And there are a couple different ways to do that, to prepare for that. None of them are perfect. None of them are even good. They all have their flaws, but they are definitely better than doing nothing. And that's the emphasis I like to say, because I'll suggest, well, you should buy long-term care insurance as one possibility. And yeah, that can work. The premiums are expensive, and that's the flaw that people typically bring up, but still, that can work. And maybe you buy a long-term care insurance policy that's a bare basics, not have all kinds of bells and whistles on it. But there are other strategies as well. If you own a home, you could keep your home equity in reserve, not tap it with a home equity loan or reverse mortgage until you need to tap the equity. And so that's something that some people could do. Putting aside money in a health savings account and not tapping it for medical expenses, letting that grow until your 80s. And that's actually one of the strategies we're doing. We have a health savings account from my prior employer. It's invested heavily in stocks. We're just letting it ride till our 80s. So that's another.
I actually love that strategy. I think health savings accounts are underused instruments, especially the investment component. Many people don't understand that when you put money in a health savings account, once you hit a certain threshold, and it's usually just $1,000 or two, you can turn on the ability to invest the money in that account in mutual funds, just like in your 401k. And as long as you use that money for medical expenses down the road, you will never pay any taxes on that money again. It's pretty amazing.
It's the common person's true tax avoidance. You know, it's a legal tax shelter. So I agree. And then if you can use a health savings account for paying for current medical expenses, which some people may need to, but if you can afford it, say you're in your 50s or 60s and you're using that as a strategy for long-term care, most people don't need that till their 80s. So they have a 20-year investing horizon. All the research on investing in stocks says if you've got that long of a horizon, you can probably afford to take the risks of investing in the stock market. And then if the stock market performs like it has up until now, it could really grow. And so I think paying attention to how you invest it even is part of the strategy here.
Yeah, absolutely. All really good strategies. And I also like the idea of, for very far down the road, for into your 80s or after you're 85, of a deferred annuity, of putting some money into an annuity that you just decide that you're not going to touch for 20, 25 years until you need to turn it on and you need that additional income for healthcare or long-term care when those expenses likely tick up in your 80s at some point. There are other things, though, that you need to consider as well. And I know that you and your colleagues at Stanford, as well as the folks at the University of Minnesota and AARP, just released a free resource to help people plan for the eventual need for somebody to help them manage their money. Can you tell us a little bit about this? Why did you decide to do it? And what can it take us through?
Okay, thanks, Jean. We're really excited. On Monday, June 28th, we launched the Thinking Ahead Roadmap, a guide to keeping your money safe as you age. And if you don't mind a quick plug, the URL is thinkingahead.org.
We don't mind at all. In fact, we'll put it in the chat so that people can find it, so that people can download it. Again, there's no cost to it, and it's a valuable resource. I've been through it.
Thank you. And actually, I misspoke. It's thinkingaheadroadmap.org.
Okay. We'll get that into the comments.
And so, yes, it's a free resource that researchers from the Stanford Center on Longevity, where I work, and the University of Minnesota. We just wanted to get out there for the public. AARP collaborated with us and funded the development. And so our motivation was seeing so many horror stories of people who became frail. And, we're talking about long-term care. Well, when that happens, you're also more frail and not able to manage your money. And so we hear these horror stories of people making mistakes and losing money, maybe being subject to exploitation or fraud. And the typical situation is there's some financial loss, and then the adult children step in and clean up the mess. And you've got to admire the children for doing that, but why not prevent the mess in the first place? And so what we're thinking of is a process that people would go through in their 50s or 60s, while they're still cognitively intact and they're still able to plan and say, this is how I want my money managed later, if the time comes. And managing money, it's not just your investments, it's, paying your bills and what insurance premiums do you need to pay. I'm going to give you an example. My wife's mother forgot to pay her homeowner's insurance, and that went on for 6 months, and she almost got canceled.
Oh, boy.
It's those kinds of things that come up. And so really, it's a matter of just making a checklist and an inventory of all your finances. And we've got on the roadmap website, we have an inventory spreadsheet that makes it real easy for people to do that. And an important part is selecting someone as your financial advocate who will step in. And there are a whole sets of considerations for that. So these are the kinds of things that we go through in the Thinking Ahead roadmap.
So a couple of specific questions on this resource, on the Thinking Ahead roadmap. First, this sounds to me like this is not directed at the children, for children taking care of their older parents. It's actually directed, I'm 56 years old. It's directed at somebody like me, asking me and the people around me to plan for my own eventuality, correct?
Correct. Yeah. Now, the children most likely might be involved is if the senior selects them as a financial advocate for them. And so, yes, the children are involved, but who's driving it? It's the senior driving the process before a mess is created, not the children stepping in, cleaning up the mess.
And how do you figure out who you select as a financial advocate? I'm sure many people listening, if I'm thinking about it, I'm gonna select my spouse. Is that right or is that wrong?
That's okay, but there's a but coming. Is that a lot of people would select their spouse as their advocate or their partner, and that's a natural choice for your first financial advocate. But think about it, you might not need this help until your 80s. Is your spouse still alive? Or maybe your spouse is frail as well. And so we'd strongly encourage people, if they're naming their spouse as their advocate, have an alternative, a backup, and bring that person in.
How do you put, I'm looking for the word, how do you put benchmarks in place so that you understand when you're having an issue? Right? I think about seniors who have the ongoing discussion of whether they are able to give up the keys, right? Or whether they should give up the keys to the car. And often, there's so much independence and pride and emotion tied up in this decision that in the moment it's hard to do. How do you prepare yourself and prepare your financial advocates so that when certain things start to happen, when I forget to pay the homeowner's bill for 6 months, when I am, doing more shopping than I should be doing, or there's a mess of paperwork in my home, that somebody else knows now's the time and I actually have indicated that I want this to happen?
Thank you. Yeah, that's an excellent question. And we have a page on the Thinking Ahead roadmap just addressing that issue. And what we've done is we've divided the signals into two categories. And one is what we call blazing red emergency signals. And it's things like a diagnosis of Alzheimer's. If you've got that diagnosis, that should be an indication that's time. A common situation for married couples is one of the spouses handles all the finances and the other one doesn't. What if that financial person passes away and the person who survives isn't comfortable with finances? So, or if you had a stroke, certain medical conditions. So we list a handful of blazing red emergency signals that says, let's start looking into this now. Then there's another category of what we call yellow caution lights. And each by itself is probably not sufficient to trigger your plan, but taken together, they have a picture. And it's like taking the car keys away. If you can't drive, that's the signal that maybe you're not managing your finances. Or if you see your home is cluttered and it hasn't been cluttered. Or if you have people coming into the house, caretakers. And there are a bunch of more of them. But it's being aware of these signals and then having your plan and say to your financial advocate or your close friends and family, hey, if you see me doing this and I'm not taking action, call, in our case, it's our daughter, Bonnie, call Bonnie, and let her know. And it's just basically letting people know. We are actually bringing in our physician too. And, Medicare has this annual mental test that they can administer. And so we're saying to our doctor, if we flunk the mental test, call Bonnie. So
you're empowering people to help you, basically.
Yeah. Right. And for some people, that's tough. They're independent and they don't want to have to rely on others. But, you reach that age in life, you're going to be dependent on others. And so let's just plan for it in a responsible way. And actually, that minimizes all the grief and heartache that the people around you feel when you see this in situation. And in the research, we found the people of our age, the biggest reason that they wanted to do this was peace of mind for themselves and their family. And if you've gone through this with other folks who haven't made this plan, there's the people who are helping the senior are really going through a lot of anguish. They're going through a lot of bills, a big mess. It really is a disruption. And so it's one of the best gifts you can give your children.
Yeah, I think it's huge. I'm thinking about the people who don't have children. I'm thinking about the fact that single individuals in this country are a fast-growing demographic, and whether or not you're single, you may not have somebody beyond your spouse that you feel like you can trust with this information. Can you hire somebody to do this for you, and who's the right person to hire?
Right. So yes, and there's a page on the website for solo agers is the name of it. And it's, as you say, it's way more common than you think. And actually think about it. If you're a married couple, one of you is going to be a solo ager at some point in your life. So it's very common. And so, yes, there are they're called daily money managers you can hire. It could be if someone in your family is really good with numbers and, those kinds of things, it could be that person. So, you may not have adult children, but you might have nieces and nephews or family friends or something. But the idea is look around for who might help you. And if you have to hire someone, then maybe that's your best choice. And then it's shopping for that person, having them in the wings in case you need them, so that then your family and friends, other people who aren't going to do the money management, but still are kind of looking out for you, they know that they don't have to do that shopping for you.
Right. Making sure that it's somebody that everybody is comfortable with is really important. I want to round back to some of the comments that have come in. Gerard is telling us that this sort of self-awareness that you were talking about with the call Bonnie conversation is very important, and I agree with him. And Thomas agrees about exercise and nutrition, and how that can be a long-term money saver. He's running 30 to 40 miles a week. Thomas, we're all chasing your tail at this point, but that's amazing. Good for you. One of our questions that came in over LinkedIn: can you roll over a portion of an IRA into an HSA? Steve, would you like to tackle this, or would you like me to?
Well, the short answer is no. So there's not much more to say.
Yeah, there's not much more to say, but you also wouldn't want to, right? I mean, one of the things that is interesting about an HSA is that it's what's called triple tax-free, right? So you get a tax deduction for making a contribution. The money grows tax-free, and when you pull it out and use it on medical expenses, it's again tax-free. And depending on the kind of IRA that you use, you would potentially get another tax deduction for making that contribution to your IRA. So you wouldn't want to you want to get all the different tax deductions that you can, and you wouldn't necessarily want to double up on that, at least as far as I understand it.
Yeah, and actually for those folks who are approaching their retirement years, or even in your 40s or 50s, I like to say the priority for saving for retirement. Number one priority, if your employer is giving you a match, max that out. Once you max that out, then if you're eligible, switch over to an HSA. Contribute forward. Once you max that out and you still have more money to save, then you can go back to unmatched contributions in your 401k or an IRA, because you just can't beat the advantages of a HSA unless the employer is matching your contribution. Then that's the only thing that beats an HSA.
Exactly. Steve, this has been a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much for all of the wonderful, wonderful information. Can you tell us a little bit more about where we can find you, where we can find information on your work, and again, where we can find the Thinking Ahead Roadmap?
Okay, so thanks, Jean, and thanks for helping our viewers out there, because these are tough issues and we're just trying to help. So the Thinking Ahead Roadmap is thinkingaheadroadmap.org. And I guess if you just Google that, you'd find it as well. And so it's up and live. And if you want to get in touch with us, the team, there's a contact us page there. So that's the Thinking Ahead Roadmap. If you want to see some of my research reports at the Stanford Center on Longevity, you go to the homepage of the Stanford Center on Longevity, and there's a publication page. And there are a whole bunch of reports there that are long. I don't encourage most people to read them, but if you want to, they're there. And then those research reports form the basis of my outreach to folks who are planning their retirement. And I have a website, restoflife.com. Rest of life is my alternative word for retirement, because I like to emphasize you're planning the rest of your life. So restoflife.com has information on my books. And then, I write for Forbes, and these are just all part of my way to get the word out to folks.
Well, we so appreciate that and appreciate you being here. And for more information from the Alliance, you can also go to protectedincome.org, where you'll find a series of questions that you can ask a financial advisor if you are looking for somebody to help you with all of the issues that we've been talking about today. Steve, again, thank you. Happy 4th of July. I hope that we get to do this again soon.
Okay, me too. Whoops.
Bye.
There you go. Thanks.
And thanks for watching, everybody. Have a great weekend.